if you were to label someone as difficult or awkward and basically hint that they're a bit of a pain in the arse, you'd expect some comeback. You'd expect some reply. You'd probably expect someone to have a go at you in return, or at the very least defend themselves. And that's pretty much what's happened with Jadon Sancho right now, because let's just go back to a couple of days ago, and what was really, I thought, quite a candid thing for a spokesman of the club to say, which was, we've heard that he can be difficult. They're talking about Jadon Sancho. They were asked, club spokesman, you can make up your mind who that might have been, was asked by Hammers News, what about Jadon Sancho? Are we interested in Jadon Sancho? Have we had talks with Jadon Sancho? That sort of thing. I can't remember what the question is, but it was about Sancho. The reply was, we've heard he can be difficult. We don't want that kind of thing. Now, in diplomacy terms, that's pretty... I think that's pretty much as forthright as you're going to get a football club speaking about a player, particularly a player that's not theirs, by the way. You might ordinarily hear something as candid as that. Let's say a player's done something really wrong and they're going to and the club will discipline a player. It may come out and say something, but that's pretty stern stuff, really, isn't it? Now, just before I go on and talk about the sort of reply that has been, put up as mitigation, or in Jadon Sancho's defence, I just want to make the point here. I don't care that we've missed out on Jadon Sancho. Not in the least, actually. I don't know if he's overhyped. He's a talented player. He's definitely talented. But I didn't think when we were linked with him, I didn't think, oh, brilliant. Actually, not from the player's perspective. I was encouraged because I thought, oh, maybe, just maybe, West Ham have got more money in this transfer window than we're letting on, because obviously he's on really, really high wages. So I think from that aspect, I was, quite buoyed by it, because I'm concerned about our ability to recruit players in this transfer window. But from the actual individual player, rather than what the interest signified, I was not asked, really. And as it transpired, it wasn't that we were going chasing this player. This player was offered to us. So any encouragement I might have taken from thinking, oh, West Ham are active in the market, was killed off pretty quickly. But the player himself is a sort of player, I find, switches it on and off. He's probably the best player in training. He's probably the complete opposite of Mr. Reliable Jarrod Bowen, who just produces, whether he's in form, whether he's out of form, whether the team's playing well, whether the team's playing poorly. Jarrod Bowen will contribute to the goals, be it supplying them or scoring them himself. I've always felt Sancho switches it off. Not just that, and I know he can play in loads of different positions, but as a winger particularly, I just don't think he's got the outright pace. Well, I mean, funny enough, he went to Manchester United, didn't he? But they'd had Elanga before that. I'd prefer Elanga to Jadon Sancho. It's just, so I like my wingers to be nice and quick and full of direct running, but very, very skillful. But I'm just making the point. I don't care that I've got no axe to grind here. I don't care that we've missed out on him. But it is a newsworthy story, because there has been, albeit tentative, negotiations, and obviously West Ham have had their say, and from the players' side, they've certainly had their say now. Now, as I understand it, Jadon Sancho was offered to West Ham by an agent representing Manchester United and the player, and it was with a view to Mohamed Kudus going to Old Trafford, which is obviously neither of those things are going to happen now. Now, you might remember, I did a video last week about it, and very much said at the time, if you go back and want to watch a video for a second time, I advise you don't, but just in case you did, I said at the time that I thought that, let me get this right, that Graham Potter had said that he wasn't his kind of player. I don't have a problem with that either. I don't think there's any situation where the club should be forcing a player on a manager that he doesn't want. We've seen it time and time again at West Ham. But included in the detail was that West Ham, and in particular Carl McCauley, had gone back to Chelsea, and he'd gone and and basically done his due diligence and basically got some reports on what Sancho was like at Chelsea. Now armed with that information, which I said last week, we then get given the information via Hammers News that the club say that they've heard Sancho can be difficult. We don't want that kind of thing. We've now got a little bit more meat on the bone, which, as we found out, actually the thing that there were two things that concerned West Ham. The first one was, well, if he's so good, why don't Chelsea want to keep him? Because at that point, it was still active that Chelsea could take him and pay the obligation to buy clause rather than the £5 million penalty. Whilst it wasn't officially out there then, West Ham very much knew that Chelsea were going to pay £5 million not to have him. So West Ham's take on it at the time was, well, if he's so good, why are Chelsea going to pay £5 million not to have him? Which I think is a fair question, by the way. As I say, got no axe to grind in this particular bit. The other problem was reports of his timekeeping. So it was fed back to West Ham that there'd been a problem with his timekeeping. And that really, more than anything else, aside from him being difficult or anything else, was given as the excuse why he didn't sign. And it was particularly with his timekeeping in terms of turning up for training. Well, now it would appear that from the player and the player's agent side, they've came out and they've completely refuted that and said that this is not the case. And I don't know, I can't talk to the manager, Maresca, but apparently Maresca has confirmed this, that actually he was only late for training on one occasion. And that was an occasion where loads of players were late for training, which is the training base for Chelsea is in Cobham. There was some big old roadworks at Wisley, and which, well, funny enough, I know that's Junction 10 on the A3, and Junction 10 and 25, A3, it looks like Armageddon there at the moment. So that I can firmly believe. Apparently, 8 players were late for training on that day because the roads all around the training ground were gridlocked. So it was very much, I think, Jadon Sancho, who's looking to repair his reputation, because what's been said by West Ham is damaging. That really is. Because if people are probably hearing West Ham are saying, well, hold on, West Ham have heard Jadon Sancho can be difficult. Oh, and by the way, Chelsea couldn't wait to give him back. We're happy to lose £5 million in the process. People are thinking, oh, hold on, he is a bad egg. Jadon Sancho's a bad egg. So this is what you get here. This is you're going to get a counterclaim now, which is basically Jadon Sancho has no problem with training. He was only ever late once, and that was on the day when loads of other people were late as well. No problem with his attitude, say Chelsea, and certainly whoever's representing him, which is fine. I don't know why. Here's my point. It's okay for West Ham not to want this player. That's okay. It actually was enough. It was enough just to say he's not the type of player Graham Potter wants. Any of it. We're playing with wing-backs. We don't see the need for this type of player. I think that was it. But unfortunately, I think when you start mudslinging, then you're going to get this back and forth, and you know, mate, that's what we got. That's what we got now, and everybody wants to have their say. Apparently, it was affordable because of the whole Kudus thing, and I do wonder. By the way, let me say this: I do wonder if there is an element of maybe Sancho, you know, all might not be well with Sancho. By the way, because let's be fair, Chelsea didn't want him, and Man United don't want to keep him, and willing to pay off part of his wages. So I think it's right we're steering well clear, by the way, just in case. And he's not the type of player we want. I just find it odd that we get into this sort of mudslinging type of situation, really, that we've got ourselves into. Ultimately, I hope we do bring somebody in. And I think there are too many. I don't know why Jack Wilshere's popped into my head. I don't know why, but he has. Because it's totally different position, different player, different circumstance, long injury record, different clubs. And Jack Wilshere was a West Ham fan. And I do think Wilshere would have really wanted to do well for West Ham, don't get me wrong. But I just think sometimes you sign players who have... I think it might have even been George Graham who said, I never sign a player that's on the way down. I never sign a player that thinks he's doing you a favour. And I'm not necessarily sure actively Wilshere ever thought he was doing West Ham a favour. In fact, I think it was probably a bad example because he was a childhood West Ham fan. But I think when you're dealing with somebody like Sancho, who's played Champions League for Borussia Dortmund, who came through Manchester City's academy, who's played for Manchester United, who's played for Chelsea, won the Conference League with Chelsea a week or two ago, and played well, by the way. I think West Ham, at the point where you've been taking a pay cut and stuff like that, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe if it was a loan signing, maybe you get a Jesse Lingard situation, and that's fine. But I think he is probably, in fact, he's a much better example than Jack Wilshere, really, isn't he? Whereas actually, he had his time, and then he wanted to prove a point against Manchester United in an effort to get a new contract or whatever it was. And during his loan period with West Ham, he very much did prove a point. Jesse Lingard proved a point that he was a good player. What he lacked thereafter, and I will stick by this, and I said at the time, Jesse Lingard will look back at his time at West Ham as the purple patch of his career. The best part of his career was right now, right then. I'm just not sure he had the motivation to carry it on. I just don't, because I think he was still 28 when and not many miles on the clock, Lingard. He was still 28. He had a lot of miles left in the clock, and I don't know. Some players are like that. They just disappear off the radar for whatever reason. It's not talent. Probably the same with Dele Alli. It's not talent with any of these people. They just stop doing it. I'm not sure that Jadon Sancho's quite like that, because I actually think there's a possibility Sancho could go back to a big club and turn it on. But West Ham, and let's be honest, we're probably not likely to be challenging in the top 8, top 9 next season, are we? To pull your socks up and muck in, I'm not so sure. And, maybe he would think he'd be doing us a favour. No, I'd rather go and get somebody young, up and coming, hungry, who wants to play for even if you don't want to play for West Ham, someone wants to prove themselves in the Premier League. Maybe someone that has come, we talk about this, from the Belgian League or the Dutch League, who's thinking, right, I'm going to play in that Premier League and I'm going to really impress. And even if ultimately their desire is not to stay at West Ham, they're motivated. And I think that's what would concern me more than anything else, that possibly Jadon Sancho isn't motivated. Not because of his timekeeping, not because he's difficult, but maybe, just maybe, that Jadon Sancho at West Ham doesn't fit, and that Graham Potter doesn't want him, and that's enough.